All right, hello and welcome to VOP this morning on the first work day of this week. My name is Moses Humphrey, and on the show today, our focus will be on the presidential candidate of the Labour Party with regards to everything he said yesterday, from workers' rally in Abuja to clarifications he made later in the day. Plus, we'll also be looking at the long drama involving the residential electoral commissioner in Adamawa State, who's now been summoned by the police, and a panel investigating him. With these in mind, we would like for you to be a part of it all by liking and subscribing to our pages on YouTube and on Instagram. On YouTube, we are Voice of the People TV, and on Instagram, we are VOP TV Live. All right, there you have it. Now, at least now you know what the weather would look like today, so you know where to avoid and how to move around. Because these days you need to be sure that the rains will not get you somewhere, because roads get flooded very easily. All right, good morning to you, Esther.
Good morning, Moses. Partly we're wearing black today. I hope it's black for good.
We are. All right.
All right, so the presidential candidate of the Labour Party, Peter Obi, says Nigeria cannot move from being a consumption country to a producing one without proper welfare and care for workers. Mr. Obi, who attended the solidarity rally of the Nigerian Labour Congress in Abuja on Monday to commemorate the 2023 Workers' Day, disclosed this in a series of tweets. Now, to quote him, he says, "I believe that labor remains the backbone of productivity. We cannot talk about moving from consumption to production without caring about the welfare and well-being of the greatest tool of that revolution, which is human labor." Mr. Obi also urged that every hard-working Nigerian to remain steadfast in the cause of building a better, a new Nigeria where there will be more jobs, high productivity, security of lives and properties, and everything that will make Nigerians proud of their country. Now, you do know that throughout his campaigns, the Labour Party presidential candidate anchored his message around transforming Nigeria from a consumption country to a producing one. Well, this is just a conversation starter. Peter Obi didn't visit Tinubu. He certainly wasn't detained in London. There is a whole lot to be talked about. Now, in order for us to actually delve into this, appropriately, of course, Cyril Abaku, welcome.
Thank you.
All right, now we heard Peter Obi's campaign speech yesterday at the rally, and actually he thanked the TUC and the Labour Congress for inviting him for that. And you heard what he actually talked about concerning the importance of giving workers a conducive welfare, providing the right tools for them to go about their business activities. Now, in that same vein, he was able to clarify a lot of issues that circulated at one point when he was arrested in London, or rather detained, which he said that a couple of political opponents took out of proportion. With his speech yesterday and with the situation that occurred, what's your say?
Well, it's a whole lot. First of all, why was Peter Obi at the Labour Congress, the Solidarity Rally? First things first. The Labour Party is the brainchild of the labor unions, and as a result of that, the labor unions are trustees of the Labour Party. So in a manner of speaking, it's their party, and it's their union. So he being there, came as a necessary ritual, if you know what I mean. So that is that. Secondly, it's a good thing that it's like taking the whole of yesterday to clear the air on a number of issues that people have been waiting to hear him speak. So yes, he did clear the air. He did say that for Nigeria to move from consumption to production, the bridge is the worker. Okay. It's not just ideas, government policies, government spending, economic philosophy. No, it's the worker who does a practical production, who stays in a factory, who may lose an arm, who has a family to take care of, who sweats, who sometimes even sheds his blood for his country. if you despise, denigrate, degrade, misuse the worker, and misuse the labor force by extension, it means you are kissing productivity and production goodbye. I think that it is fundamental that Mr. Peter B was at the rally and to clear the air on these issues and to put them where they belong. I think that for one, the NLC, for example, their president, as soon as he became president of the NLC, he did visit the Labour Party headquarters to say that the NLC owns, was part and parcel of the Labour Party, that they owned, he basically came to say, we are one with you in spirit and in body. Any worker can vote for any party, it's fine. But as an institution, as a union, we know that we are stakeholders in the Labour Party. So I think that this sort of front is important. One, as part of social mobilization, it's important as part of the solidarity of the workers. It's important that there is some sort of a nucleus for things to revolve around when it comes to labor, welfare, and so on and so forth. Whether the P2B eventually becomes president or not is secondary. But for once, let's have a labor union that has a clear-cut political ideology, clear-cut position on issues. Yesterday, it wasn't just about P2B. The president of the Labour Congress, Joe Ajero, also laid out what he thought was the agenda for labor and what was the high point of those demands. He said he wanted 65% retirement age, that the retirement age should move from 60 to 65. There was a time when retirement was 55. I think even less in Nigeria. But somebody came and fought and said no, and gave compelling argument that moved it to 60. So if the labor unions coming under the NLC is now saying that this thing should be moved to 65, I think that these are cries that nobody can take for granted. I do believe that beyond P2B, both Atiku Abubakar and the president-elect himself, Bola Tinubu, are all taking cognizance of what happened at the at Ego Square yesterday. One,
yes.
And secondly, they also issued statements talking about what solidarizing with the workers.
Yes.
P2B did, Atiku did, and then Bola Tinubu also did. Bola Tinubu in particular, where he talked about the promise of a living wage.
Yes,
and
he
also
did.
talked
He
about
did say so.
the fact that tough sacrifices were coming.
Yes.
So let's wait to see. For me, it's good to have this panoramic view of what is going on, especially when it comes to labor. For a long time, I have to say that for a long time, for a long time, the labor unions didn't seem to have much teeth.
All right then.
They didn't seem to be able to stamp their feet
for a long time.
Yes,
but now they seem to be talking now.
Yes.
All right, so we do have a legal practitioner, Evans Tufeli, joining us virtually. Good morning to you, Evans. All right, so we seem to be having a bit of a network glitch there. Well, when he joins us again, we'll definitely let you know. Now, in an interview, Peter Obi did say he did address the purported detention in the UK, and he said he wasn't detained for more than 20 minutes. It was, it was a protocol thing, and he was called in, and they said his identity was being duplicated. That it was just a regular thing. He went on to say how he has not broken any law. And the reason, according to him, the reason he didn't address this at that time was because it was a fasting period for both Christians and Muslims. And I have a trouble with that.
Why?
If there is an allegation against you, and people needed to know, people needed to hear from him at that time, and you're holding back information because there is a fast going on. There are atheists in Nigeria as well. There are traditional
enemies
who were not fasting.
Yes.
Who were not fasting, but needed to get information.
Yeah, so the point to be made, I think that to be in the interest of fairness, we might have unwittingly created some more questions on the saga of his detention in the UK. I remember very clearly the statement issued by Diron Onifade, if I'm correct, the head of Obitati Media. He did say that it took the intervention of Nigerians in the UK.
Really
All right, so let's hold our thought. Let's hold our thought. Let's welcome Evans Ofeli now. Good morning to you, Evans.
Good morning.
All right, great. Good to have you on the show. Now
Thank you.
let's allow Cyril to land, and then we'll come to you. Go ahead, Cyril.
Yes. So he did say that it took the intervention of Nigerians who, as it were, put pressure. I'm not quoting him, but who sort of pressurized or threw their noses into what was going on to secure his release. The question was about impersonation, and that he was detained. Is it for hours or for days? I can't pick it now.
For hours.
Yes, for hours. And that, in fact, what he did say, and he concluded by saying that the person, that it means that his impersonator could still be on the loose. So these are very, very clear, very specific, very specified grounds of claim, which was to say that there could be a third party or third parties who are seeking to bring people into disrepute. But it does clearly appear to me that what was canvassed or advertised in Onifade's statement is not so much the same thing as what P2B perhaps came to say yesterday.
Further.
Now, if the spokesman of your campaign team could speak in spite of Ramadan or Lent, I don't think that it would have been out of place for you to also have spoken. Maybe because he's still a candidate, so maybe he can accommodate that sort of silence. Otherwise, if you are president, if there was a foreign aggressor on your land, you won't say because of Ramadan or because of Lent. I have always said that the affairs of state, they don't obviate piety, but you cannot use piety as an excuse not to do your job as president. So, but I mean, for what it is worth, I know that his supporters are very passionate about his person, passionate about whatever happens to him, and I think that P2B has enjoyed sufficient sympathy for him to be dragged into. But the reality is that I think the discrepancies. Well, I mean, if we look at what we did in the newspaper segment, you know that President Buhari didn't tell us until he won. When we started hearing that some of those things that his spokesmen were saying were not what he personally. I think P2B has afforded courage to come out and say, well, this is what I mean, between what someone else has said and what he has said, I think it is what he has said that really stands and counts as the true
picture of things.
Picture of events, yes.
All right. Mr. Evans, again, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, so here is a scenario. Due to yesterday being Labor Day, Workers' Day, Joe Ajaero, vowed that the Labor Union will create a hall of shame for judges that undermine the tenets of the judiciary and come up with ridiculous judgments on election petitions. Now, you recall about last week, Peter Obi actually said that INEC and the Election Petition Tribunal should not show any form of bias. He literally also put INEC in their place by saying INEC should rather defend themselves and not try to defend anybody else. That is, in this time around, the All Progressives Congress presidential candidate who is now the president-elect. Now, Joe Ajaero is actually saying that one of the bane that has affected our democracy is INEC, and that it would do well for the Election Petition Tribunal, that is the judges, to make sure that they do things as neutral as possible, or objectively make sure that the cases presented to them are done appropriately. Otherwise, he says that they will create a hall of shame for the judiciary. What's your take on that statement that he made?
I think we have gotten to that level. The judiciary brought this upon itself. It is important that the judiciary uphold the rule of law. That is exactly the function of the judiciary. Section 6 of the 1999 Constitution, as amended, clearly states the functions and responsibility of the judiciary, and one of which is not that they should compromise. It's not that they should bend the rules or be partisan and all that. So the objective fidelity of the judiciary is what Joe Ajaero is calling for, that the judiciary will come handy in dispensing justice in this era and beyond now. And that is what everybody should call for. It is important because the rule of law is what sustains democracy. And anyone, any person or institution that undermines the rule of law is an enemy of the state. And that call is critical because we have seen cases where the judiciary have turned the rule of law on its head. It's my constituency, but like you know me, I don't mind words. When I want to talk, I talk. The judiciary have not done particularly well in some cases.
To actually quote him, he said that the
seen.
judiciary has, gone away with ridiculous judgments, and they set so many states and institutions on fire with such judgments, and that they have questions to answer from Nigerians. Would you say that phrase, that statement was too harsh coming from him on the judiciary?
It's not too harsh. The judiciary brought it upon itself. Look at the case of Lawan. Okay, in the election that was just concluded. Look at how it went. Look at the case of Imo State, the current Imo State governor, how he emerged as the governor of that state. These are sins committed by the judiciary, and these sins are committed against the citizen. They are not forgivable. So if the judiciary wants to toe that line again, this call is critical to that cause, that the judiciary must stay away from bias, from partisanship, from fluctuating and upturning the rule of law. If the judiciary must function, it must uphold the rule of law dispassionately, okay? And you see, the call is timeless because we have a very huge and sensitive case ahead of us for which the judiciary is expected to dispense justice dispassionately. So the call is very timeless, and it's important that the judiciary act according to its rules. That is the only way that this country will move forward.
All right. So continuing with that particular phrase from Juajeru and looking at what transpired yesterday, where the presidential candidate of the Labour Party actually said that it is important for an enabling environment and the institution of workers to be properly looked into. Now let's look at that, simultaneously, that is side by side. The workers have in certain times complained about the state of poverty. They've complained about the rise in fluctuation. They've complained about the fact that when it comes to their benefits, they do not get it. They also complain about the fact that organizations and companies and even the government itself doesn't understand the importance of looking into their welfare. Now, the Minister of Labour and Employment, in person of Chris Ngige, also yesterday, while he was, talking about what some certain workers do, what these unions do when it comes to them putting their feet on the floor to ask or demand for whatever it is they consider to be their right, said that over time, it's only in this part of the world where you have workers going on strike for months and then demanding to be paid for those hours and the months that they did not work. And that he's putting his foot down to say any worker who decides to go on strike, it's their right to go on strike, but they shouldn't expect to be paid, and that he's going to stick with it. Now, there have been calls and reactions to that, saying that before workers eventually go on strike, they have already notified the federal government, they've notified the ministry, and the ministry is usually not proactive to attend to these issues until the strike commences. So it's almost like they're frustrated beforehand, and even while they decide to press home their demand, they're also frustrated and not giving their due diligence. What's your take on that statement, saying this time around they're sticking with what the law says, no work, no pay?
Well, I think the minister is reactionary. I mean, the Minister of Labour and Productivity is reactionary in that statement. There's no law that says no work, no pay. I mean, how about the law that compels the federal government to ensure that the citizens and workers are treated duly? Okay, how about that law? He didn't say anything about that law. Okay, how come that there are two different rules of engagement in remuneration in Nigeria? You have the Labour Act, which is specifically drafted for workers. And then you have a different law for remuneration for politicians, okay? So, I mean, you have such level of injustice, you have such level of inegalitarianism, and then you want to fix that on the public and say workers should act in that. It's not possible. It's not going to work. We have a situation at hand where the workers are unduly treated. They are not well treated because if you look at their wages, you have issues there. Their allowances, you have issues there. Now, when you compare it to that of the politicians, even the ministers, and all that, you will see that there's a huge difference. And we operate in the same economy, okay? So why don't you upscale the life of the average worker and then benchmark that against that of the politician and get an harmonious resolution so that the workers in Nigeria will come alive. Look at the minimum wage. Look at the level of inflation, okay? There are a lot of factors. It also contributes to why the average Nigerian worker is not productive. Now, that has made everybody extractive. Everybody is now looking for what to get. The civil servants have now become contractors, okay, which is against the civil service rules because what they are paid is nothing to write home about, okay, and they have children who are in schools. They have bills to take care of. They have a lot to do. So the economic injustice of Nigeria should be looked into. And throughout the campaign and even after the election, from all the candidates I never heard anything about economic justice, okay? People were just busy talking about how they are going to build road, give light, and all that. The real problem of the average Nigerian worker was never discussed, was never in the manifesto of any of the political parties. I read the manifesto of 6 political parties, okay? I did not see a conscious attempt to address the plight of the Nigerian worker, okay? So the minister need to be proactive. It is not enough to put people in harm's way. You must approach issues from the root. You don't go and say no work, no pay. That is not a psychological approach. You must be able to bring, if there are challenges, if there are unsurmountable challenges that the government faces that has prevented them from meeting up to the demands of workers, then start there in your communication. Strategic communication is important. Start from those challenges. Get the workers on board. Let them see what is available, what is projected, and how the workers can make input into this. So by the time the workers are able to appreciate the position of government vis-a-vis what is available, the workers will find a way to understand what the situations are. But when you tell them that they cannot do this, whereas you are, when you say no work, no, even the politicians, how many days of the week do they work? As against what they earn.
All right.
Okay, sometimes they go on recess for 3 weeks, 1 month. Doing nothing, and they earn more than those who work every day. So we should look at these issues critically.
All right, Cyril. President-elect also gave a speech yesterday alongside, Peter Obi. Peter Obi is asking for better reforms, especially concerning policies for the labor force. Now, the president-elect came and said that workers in the country would have a living wage that would give them a decent life to provide for their families under his leadership, okay? And he says that he's going to create an environment that is dependable, whereby there'll be a cause for social and economic justice for all Nigerians. And he said that these aspects were in his agenda, his manifesto, where he talked about the renewed hope agenda for a better Nigeria. Considering what we already have on ground now, remember we talked about this, I think, last month, where we said about 46 trillion naira is being handed over to the incoming administration.
You mean the debt?
The debt, exactly. And then we still have a couple of other issues too, where, has not been properly put in perspective. With what that existing reality is in place, and what he says, do we marry? Is it possible for that to happen when he comes in?
No, we need to understand the psychology of political language. Yes, because a living wage is not a promise.
Okay.
The living wage is poetry. You know, it's been said that you campaign in poetry and govern in prose. The living wage is poetry. It's sweet. It sounds good, but what's a living wage in Nigeria today? If you factor in your house rent, factor in school fees, factor in transport, factor in food. Now they said don't eat Indomie chicken, right? So you factor in real food, factor in what you wear, factor in the day-to-day running of your house, because there's no light, so you have to buy generator, buy fuel. How much is a liter of fuel, and how much do you consume per day? Even 100,000 naira cannot give anybody a meaningful life. It's the honest truth. 100,000 naira today every month cannot give anybody a meaningful life. Now the labor unions will tell you two things. They will tell you, one, they will say you either pay us enough to cover the deficit of all these things that I've listed, or you make sure that as a government you provide the amenities, provide facilities, provide everything that we would need as a people: transport, education, an education that even that I mean, what, for example, what you may have to pay for with an arm and a leg to get in a private institution, if you can get the same in a public school, for example. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if these things, if healthcare is affordable, for example, say primary healthcare, if all of these things are in place, do you know that even with a minimum wage of 10,000 naira or 15,000 naira in a good economy will be enough, even after tax, will be enough to cater for our needs, for some, for
basic needs.
Yes, for basic needs. But in a case where you are drilling your own borehole, contributing money,
powering your own electricity.
well, when we say powering yourself, we are not even talking about generator now. You will have to contribute money as a street or as an estate, buy a transformer, buy poles, buy high tension cables. I'm not making this up. Buy all of these things. Now call power holding to come and fix it for you. So if we've been, it's like relegating us to our own fate. So if people have been left in such a limbo, what then becomes a living wage for them? So it is. So when we talk about living wage, we are either talking about government will do what it ought to do, and make sure everything is good with it, or the economy remains in a limbo, and then we go to church to sign up for inflation. Because of course, when you raise price of when you raise workers' pay like that, inevitably inflation also sets in. We are going to wait to see how the president-elect wants to work out his promise of a living wage. In my view, it has to be that social infrastructure must be priority. You can't be constructing one road for 50 years, Lagos Ibadan Expressway, East-West Road. The railways that we borrow money to fix now, they are going up in flames. And then there's insecurity. So when all of these are happening, what it means that once money enters your hand today, you will never leave secretary. And before the month, people have already taken rice and beans credit and so on. So the Nigerian worker is endangered, quite frankly speaking. Corruption thrives because a lot of people have no other recourse. It's a simple truth. So if government wakes up to its responsibility and fixes things that it should be fixing, then you can talk. You can face the worker. But if they know that even you, as chief executive, your hands are not clean, you cannot go to equity with soiled hands. What we want is a country, like Peter B said, that goes not just from consumption to production. We must go into industrialization. We must produce and export. We must earn foreign currencies.
That's the way to go.
That's the way to go. I mean, we have oil now. There's this whole issue about subsidies. What we really ought to do, we should be net exporters of petrol and of all the things that come from what's it called? From refining crude. You know what I mean? Kerosene and so on. But an oil producing country that imports oil, it is such a paradox that has not been unraveled. And so this whole thing comes down to, yes, May has come and gone. The workers have tabled their demands. It's not just enough. Look now, listen. It's not just enough that the presidential candidates of PDP, APC, and Labour Party spoke yesterday. We have heard what the workers have had to say. One, hall of shame for judicial officers.
Yes.
what are the judicial reforms that have been put on the table by these candidates, and more especially by the president-elect, more especially. Number two, the Labour Party has talked about, the Labour unions have talked about a retirement at the age of 65. By this morning, the president-elect should be responding to them. You don't go to sleep. Don't turn it into. Don't say on May you issue a statement, you say a lot of sweet things, then you relax. No. By this morning, we should be getting the responses. So this also has to be, and this is what democracy is about, an ongoing conversation. What to be, what not to be. You shoot a little from the left, I come a little from the right, we meet in the middle of the road. It means we made progress. If we won't do it like that, then it's not democracy. The president and government cannot impose anything on workers and taxation on the country. You see that the president normally would have attended Labour Day rally. You didn't see him there yesterday. I'm not sure he was there. President Buhari. I think as far as he's concerned,
he's done. As far as he's concerned, he's done. Oh well.
Wow.
Thank you very much, Cyril Abaku, VOP in-house
Analyst.
Analyst.
Yes.
Thank you very much for coming on the program. We'll stay with you, Evan Tufeli, legal practitioner. We'll stay with you as we go into our second topic for today, if you don't mind. Is that okay by you? Well, I believe it's okay by him. Mm-hmm. Well, a police panel investigating the displaced INEC wreck in Adamawa has invited him to appear before it. Well, how close are we to closure on this matter? Well, that conversation comes up in a bit. Stay with us.